You're not my real mom, and you never will be." Amber's words cut like a knife, her blue eyes flashing with defiance as she glared at me across the kitchen table. "Your father is barely in the ground, and all you care about is his money?" I struggled to keep my voice steady, gripping the coffee mug to stop my hands from shaking. "Do you have any idea how selfish and shallow that is?" Amber scoffed, flipping her long blonde hair over her shoulder. "Oh, please, spare me the lecture. We all know you only married Dad for his money anyway. You're nothing but a gold-digger stepmom." I recoiled as if she'd slapped me. In the 3 years since I'd married David, I tried so hard to connect with his teenage daughter, to be a positive maternal figure in her life. But Amber fought me at every turn with cruel jabs and icy indifference. "How dare you?" I managed to choke out, hot tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I loved your father with all my heart, and I've done nothing but try to love you too, even when you treat me like dirt under your designer boots that he paid for." "Whatever," Amber rolled her eyes. "I don't need your love. In fact, I don't need you at all. Once I turn 21 and get my inheritance, I'm going to buy a sick penthouse downtown and live it up. Maybe I'll even splurge on front-row tickets to see Jaden Cross and make all my friends jealous." My heart clenched at the cavalier way she spoke of frittering away David's hard-earned money I'd urged him to put into a trust to provide for Amber's college and future. But in the end, his guilt over being an absentee father led him to indulge her every material whim. "Amber Catherine Henderson, you listen to me!" I stood up, my chair screeching against the tile floor. "Life isn't all about money and material things. Your father would be so disappointed to hear you talk like this. There's more to life than—" "God, just shut up already!" Amber shouted, slamming her palms on the table. "You're not my mother, and you have no right to lecture me, especially now that Dad's gone. Why don't you do us both a favor and get the hell out of my house?" "Your house," I sputtered in disbelief. "That's right," she smiled smugly. "Dad updated his will before the accident. This place is mine now, along with everything else. So pack your bags, Rachel. I want you gone by the weekend." With that, she stormed out, leaving me shell-shocked. I collapsed back into the chair, my legs no longer able to support me. How could this be happening? In an instant, the only family I'd left was ripped away, leaving me with nothing but the sting of my stepdaughter's brutal rejection. As sobs racked my body, I couldn't help but wonder, was Amber right? Had I just been fooling myself to think I could ever be a mother to her after all the bad blood between us? Now, with David gone, I was left at the mercy of a cruel, entitled teen who wanted nothing more than to throw me out on the streets. But even through the haze of grief and shock, a small ember of anger sparked to life deep in my chest. I didn't just marry David for money. I married him for love, and I refused to let Amber's bitter lies rob me of the only real family I'd ever known. Somehow, I vowed I would make this right. I had to, for David's sake, if not my own. The day I met David Henderson started out like any other. I was waitressing at a busy downtown diner, juggling orders and refilling coffees, when he walked in and changed my life forever. Tall and distinguished with salt and pepper hair, David had a kind smile that immediately put me at ease. We struck up a conversation as I took his order, bonding over our shared love of classic rock. He was charming and easy to talk to, unlike any of the other suited businessmen who frequented the diner. When he left, I found a generous tip and his business card tucked under his plate, with a handwritten note asking me to dinner. Fast forward 2 whirlwind years, and I was walking down the aisle in a white dress, saying I do to the man of my dreams. I knew our 20-year age gap raised some eyebrows, but I didn't care. David treated me like a queen, showering me with love and affection that I'd never known before. But our happily ever after was complicated by one thing: David's teenage daughter, Amber. From the moment I moved into their sprawling suburban mansion, Amber made it clear that I would never replace her late mother in her eyes. She was fiercely protective of her father, always watching me with suspicious eyes, as if waiting for me to put a foot wrong. I tried my best to bond with Amber, suggesting shopping trips and girls' days out, but she consistently brushed me off. Her world revolved around her friends, her social media followers, and her obsession with pop star Jaden Cross. David confessed that he'd been an absent father when Amber was younger due to building his business empire, and now overcompensated by indulging her every whim. As the years went on, Amber's behavior grew increasingly rebellious and concerning. She frequently skipped school, snuck out at night, and maxed out the credit cards David gave her. When I found a bag of marijuana in her room and confronted her, Amber exploded. "You're not my mom, Rachel," she screamed, her face twisted in anger. "Stop trying to control my life and mind your own damn business." I was stunned by the vitriol in her voice. David and I had many tense conversations about setting boundaries with Amber, but he always caved to her tears and guilt trips in the end. It was a losing battle. The breaking point came when Amber was arrested for shoplifting and David was out of town on business. I rushed to the police station to bail her out, my heart in my throat. When the officer led Amber out, mascara streaked down her face. She wouldn't even look at me. "I can't believe you called the cops on me," she spat as we drove home in tense silence. "You just wanted to humiliate me and make yourself look good in front of Dad." "Amber, I didn't call anyone," I said evenly, gripping the steering wheel. "The store pressed charges. You broke the law and there are consequences," she scoffed. "Please, like you're some perfect saint. I know you're just waiting for your chance to get rid of me so you can have Dad all to yourself. You'd love it if I got shipped off to juvie, wouldn't you?" I bit back my anger, knowing it would only make things worse. But that night, after a long talk with David, I broke down in tears, wondering how much more I could take. I loved my husband deeply, but his daughter was poison, slowly eroding our marriage from the inside out. Little did I know then just how far Amber was willing to go to destroy me completely. Her final act of betrayal in the wake of David's sudden death was more cruel than I ever could have imagined. She didn't just break my heart, she shattered it beyond repair. The day my world shattered started with a phone call. I was in the middle of a meeting at the event planning company where I worked when my cell buzzed with an unknown number. Something told me to answer it. Call it intuition or the feeling of dread that had been building in my gut all morning. "Is this Mrs. Rachel Henderson?" a somber male voice asked. "Yes, this is she," I replied, my heart starting to race. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Officer Briggs with the Maple Valley Police Department. I'm afraid there's been an accident involving your husband, David Henderson." The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the conference table, my knuckles turning white. Is he okay?" I managed to choke out. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Your husband was pronounced dead at the scene. A drunk driver ran a red light and struck his vehicle head-on. There was nothing the paramedics could do." A scream lodged in my throat as the officer's words sunk in. David, my soulmate, my rock, was gone in an instant, ripped away by the reckless actions of a stranger. I collapsed into my chair, sobs racking my body as my colleagues looked on in confusion and concern. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and condolence calls. I moved through them in a fog of grief, barely able to function. The only thing that kept me going was the thought of being there for Amber. She had just lost her father. Surely, in this time of shared mourning, we could put aside our differences and lean on each other for support. But when I arrived home from the funeral home, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. Amber was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone and giggling at something on the screen. She glanced up when I entered, her expression bored. "Oh, hey, Rachel," she said casually, as if discussing the weather. "What's for dinner?" "I'm starving." I stared at her in disbelief. "Amber, we just buried your father. How can you think about food at a time like this?" She rolled her eyes. "What, am I supposed to cry 24/7? Dad's dead. Life goes on. Speaking of which, when do I get my inheritance? I need to buy a new dress for Jaden Cross's album release party next week." Rage boiled up inside me, hot and explosive. I clenched my fists at my sides, willing myself not to lash out. "Are you serious right now? Your father is dead and all you care about is shopping and partying? Do you have no shame?" Amber's eyes narrowed. "Oh, get off your high horse, Rachel. We both know you're just playing the grieving widow so you can get your hands on Dad's money. Well, joke's on you. He changed his will before he died. Everything goes to me when I turn 21. The world tilted on its axis. I grabbed the back of an armchair to steady myself, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. David would never cut me out like that, not after everything we'd been through together. "You're lying," I whispered, hot tears streaming down my face. "David loved me. He wouldn't do that to me." Amber smirked, a cruel gleam in her eyes. "Believe what you want, but I have the papers to prove it. Face it, Rachel, you were never anything more than a gold-digging trophy wife. And now that Dad's gone, your free ride is over." With that, she sauntered out of the room, leaving me shattered on the floor. I curled into a ball, my heart splintering into a million jagged pieces. In one fell swoop, my husband and the life we'd built together had been ripped away, leaving me at the mercy of a heartless, greedy girl I once called my stepdaughter. But even as despair threatened to swallow me whole, a small, fierce voice whispered in the back of my mind. This wasn't over. Amber may have won this battle, but the war was just beginning. One way or another, I would make her pay for destroying everything I held dear. The weeks following David's death were a waking nightmare. Amber wasted no time in asserting her newfound power, making it clear that I was no longer welcome in the home we once shared. She enlisted the help of her older half-sisters, Kylie and Brooke, to make my life a living hell. Well, if it isn't the wicked stepmother," Kylie sneered as she breezed into the kitchen one morning, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. "Shouldn't you be packing your bags? Amber wants you out ASAP." I gripped my coffee mug tightly, willing myself to stay calm. "This is my home too, Kylie. I'm not going anywhere until I speak with the lawyer about David's will." Brooke, who was perched on a bar stool filing her nails, let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, honey, there's nothing to discuss. Daddy dearest made it very clear. Everything goes to Amber. You're just the help now." Rage bubbled up inside me, but I tamped it down. Losing my temper would only give them more ammunition. I don't believe for a second that David would cut me out completely. He loved me. "Loved you?" Kylie scoffed. "Please, you were just a midlife crisis fling. A pretty young thing to boost his ego and warm his bed. But now that he's gone, it's time for you to go back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of." Tears stung my eyes at the cruel jab, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give these spoiled brats the satisfaction of seeing me break. Over the next few days, the sisters ramped up their campaign of harassment. They accidentally threw away my belongings, blasted music at all hours of the night, and left messes for me to clean up. Amber was the ringleader, strutting around the house like a pint-sized dictator. "Hurry up and pack, Rachel," she sing-songed as she passed my room, where I was stuffing clothes into a suitcase. "I've got big plans for this place once you're gone. Maybe I'll turn your bedroom into a yoga studio or a glam room for my YouTube channel." I gritted my teeth, biting back the urge to scream. I had to get out of here before I completely lost it. With a heavy heart, I loaded my few remaining possessions into my beat-up car and drove away from the only place that had ever felt like home. I ended up in a dingy studio apartment on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered life. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the cracked bathroom mirror, hollow-eyed, gaunt, and utterly defeated. As I lay on the lumpy mattress night after night, listening to the sounds of sirens and domestic disputes filtering through the thin walls, the full weight of Amber's betrayal hit me. She had taken everything from me, my husband, my home, my sense of security and belonging. And for what? So she could blow through David's fortune on designer clothes and VIP tickets? The more I stewed on it, the more my grief transformed into something darker and more volatile. Anger, bitterness, and the desperate need for revenge consumed me, eating away at my insides like a cancer. I barely ate or slept, spending my days scrolling through social media, watching Amber flaunt her stolen wealth without a care in the world. But even in my lowest moments, I never lost sight of my ultimate goal. Someday, somehow, I would make Amber pay for what she'd done. I didn't know how or when, but I would bide my time and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. And when that day came, heaven help anyone who stood in my way. For now, I would focus on survival, on putting one foot in front of the other and clawing my way out of the pit of despair Amber had pushed me into. I owed it to myself and to David's memory to keep fighting, no matter how bleak things seemed. Rock bottom found me on a Tuesday morning. hunched over the toilet in my dingy bathroom, retching up the meager contents of my stomach. It had been months since David's death and Amber's cruel takeover, and I was a shadow of my former self. I'd lost my job, my savings, and any shred of dignity I once possessed. As I wiped my mouth with a trembling hand, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes stared back at me from a gaunt, sallow face. I barely recognized the broken woman I'd become. A sudden pounding on the door jolted me out of my self-pity. I stumbled to the entryway, my heart racing. Had Amber found me? Was she here to finish the job of destroying me completely? But when I peered through the peephole, I saw only my landlord's scowling face. "Open up, Rachel," he barked. "Your rent is late again. You've got 24 hours to pay up or you're out on the street." Panic clawed at my throat as I fumbled with the locks. I'd been scraping by on meager unemployment checks and the kindness of friends, but even that had run dry. I had nowhere else to go. Thus, no one left to turn to. As I pleaded with the landlord for more time, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. I glanced down at the screen and felt my blood turn to ice. "Having fun playing poor Rachel?" Amber's message read, accompanied by a photo of her lounging on a yacht, champagne flute in hand. "Guess being a gold digger doesn't pay so well when your meal ticket kicks the bucket. Sucks to be you." Red-hot rage surged through my veins, temporarily eclipsing the despair that had been my constant companion. With shaking fingers, I typed out a response. "You heartless bitch. Your father would be disgusted if he could see you now." Amber's reply was instantaneous. "Ah, poor Rachel. Still clinging to the delusion that Daddy ever loved you? Newsflash, you were just a warm body to him, a midlife crisis fling he got bored with. Why else would he leave everything to me?" I couldn't breathe. The walls of the tiny apartment seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with the weight of Amber's cruelty. I needed to get out, to escape the prison of my own misery before it consumed me whole. I stumbled out into the street, ignoring the landlord's shouts and the curious stares of my neighbors. I walked for hours, no destination in mind, until my feet ached and my lungs burned. When I finally looked up, I found myself standing at the edge of a bridge, staring down into the churning waters below. It would be so easy, I thought dimly, to just let go and drift away on the current, leaving all the pain and heartache behind. Amber would probably throw a party if she found out I'd offed myself, one less obstacle in her path to total domination. But even as the dark thoughts swirled in my head, a small, fierce voice whispered in the back of my mind, "Don't let her win, Rachel. Don't give that spoiled brat the satisfaction of breaking you completely." I gripped the railing tightly, torn between the temptation of oblivion and the burning desire for revenge. In the end, it was the latter that won out. I couldn't let Amber get away with this. I had to make her pay for destroying my life, for spitting on David's memory with her selfish, greedy actions. With a shuddering breath, I stepped back from the edge and squared my shoulders. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to bring Amber to her knees. I would make her regret the day she ever crossed me. But first, I needed to focus on survival, on picking up the shattered pieces of my life and rebuilding from the ground up. It wouldn't be easy, but I was done rolling over and playing dead. Amber may have knocked me down, but I was far from out. And when the time was right, I would rise from the ashes and make her rue the day she ever underestimated Rachel Henderson. Karma has a funny way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. For months after my breakdown on the bridge, I barely functioned, going through the motions of life like a zombie. I took a job waitressing at a seedy diner. The irony of coming full circle not lost on me. But even in my darkest moments, I never lost sight of my ultimate goal, to make Amber pay for what she'd done. I kept tabs on her through social media, watching with gritted teeth as she flaunted her stolen wealth and lived the high life. It was during one of my late-night hate-scrolling sessions that I stumbled upon a news article that made my heart stop. "Pop star's girlfriend assaulted by crazed fan," the headline blared. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the link and began to read. According to the report, Amber had become obsessed with Jaden Cross, the singer she'd been infatuated with for years. She'd started stalking him, showing up at his concerts and private events uninvited. When Jaden's girlfriend confronted her, Amber had flown into a rage and physically attacked her. The article included a mugshot of Amber, her once perfect face twisted into a snarl of rage and entitlement. She'd been arrested and charged with assault and battery and was currently being held without bail. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Could it really be this easy? After all the pain and suffering Amber had put me through, was she finally going to face some consequences for her actions? I dug deeper, combing through court records and legal documents, and that's when I found it. The smoking gun that would bring Amber's house of cards tumbling down. According to David's will, Amber's inheritance was contingent on her staying out of legal trouble and maintaining a certain standard of behavior. By getting arrested and charged with a violent crime, she had violated the terms of the will. And that meant the entire estate would revert to the secondary beneficiary, me. I couldn't believe it. After all this time, the key to my revenge had been right under my nose. I wasted no time in contacting David's lawyer and setting the wheels in motion. When the day of the hearing arrived, I strode into the courtroom with my head held high. Amber was there, looking small and pathetic in her orange jumpsuit, her once perfect hair stringy and unkempt. As the judge read out the terms of the will and the consequences of Amber's actions, I watched the color drain from her face. She turned to me, her eyes wide with panic and disbelief. "Rachel, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't do this. I'm sorry for everything, I swear. Just give me another chance." I looked at her coldly, unmoved by her crocodile tears. "You had your chance, Amber. You blew it the moment you decided to spit on your father's memory and treat me like dirt. This is the consequences of your own actions." The judge banged his gavel, making it official. The entire Henderson estate, all of David's hard-earned wealth and assets, now belonged to me. And Amber was left with nothing but a criminal record and a mountain of legal fees. I walked out of the courthouse that day feeling lighter than I had in months. Justice had finally been served, and Amber was getting a long-overdue taste of her own medicine. But even as I savored my victory, I knew my work was far from over. I had a new mission now, to honor David's legacy and use his fortune to make a positive difference in the world. Amber may have tried to destroy me, but in the end, she only made me stronger. And I was determined to make the most of this second chance at life, free from the toxic influence of my wicked stepdaughter. The day of Amber's sentencing arrived, and I made sure I had a front-row seat in the courtroom. After her arrest and the revelation that she had violated the terms of David's will, the case against her had proceeded swiftly. Her high-priced lawyers had tried every trick in the book to get her off, but the evidence was overwhelming. As I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Finally, after all the pain and suffering Amber had put me through, she was going to face the consequences of her actions. The bailiff led Amber in, her wrists and ankles shackled. She looked pale and drawn, a far cry from the entitled princess she had once been. When her eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of fear and desperation. The judge called the court to order and began to read out the charges. Assault and battery, stalking, violating a restraining order. The list went on and on. As the prosecutor made his case, laying out the evidence of Amber's crimes in damning detail, I watched her squirm in her seat. She knew she was trapped, that there was no way out of this mess she had created for herself. Finally, it was my turn to speak. As the victim of Amber's cruelty and betrayal, I had been granted the right to deliver an impact statement before the court. I stood up on shaking legs, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I looked directly at Amber as I began to speak. "Your Honor, I stand before you today not just as the victim of Amber Henderson's crimes, but as a survivor of her emotional abuse and manipulation. For years, I tried to be a good stepmother to her, to love and support her even as she pushed me away at every turn." I paused, my voice cracking with emotion. But Amber didn't want my love. She wanted my husband's money, and she was willing to do anything to get it. When David died and left his estate to her, she saw her chance to get rid of me once and for all. I described the campaign of harassment and intimidation Amber and her sisters had waged against me, the cruel taunts and vicious lies they had spread. I spoke of the toll it had taken on my mental and physical health, the despair and hopelessness I had felt. But even in my darkest moments, I never lost sight of the truth. Amber may have thought she was untouchable, that she could get away with anything because of her wealth and privilege, but in the end, her own actions were her undoing. I turned to face Amber directly, my voice steady and strong. You may have taken everything from me, Amber. My home, my security, my sense of self-worth, but you couldn't take away my integrity or my determination to see justice served. Amber glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred and resentment. You think you've won, don't you? She hissed. You may have the money now, but you'll never be half the woman my mother was. You're nothing but a pathetic gold digger who got lucky. The judge banged his gavel, silencing her outburst. That's enough, Miss Henderson. You have shown no remorse for your actions, and your lack of respect for this court and your victims is appalling. He turned to me, his expression softening. Mrs. Henderson, I commend you for your bravery and resilience in the face of such adversity. No one should have to endure what you went through, and I am truly sorry for your loss. With that, he sentenced Amber to 5 years in prison and ordered her to pay restitution to her victims, including Jaden Cross's girlfriend. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. As the bailiff led Amber away in handcuffs, she turned to me one last time, her face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Rachel. I'll make you pay for this, I swear. I just smiled sadly, shaking my head. It's already over, Amber. You lost the moment you chose greed and cruelty over love and family. I hope one day you can find peace and redemption, but I won't be holding my breath. With that, I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high. The battle had been long and brutal, but in the end, justice had prevailed, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that I had the strength and courage to overcome anything. 5 years later, I stood in the foyer of the Henderson mansion, taking in the elegant decor and the soft strains of classical music filling the air. It was hard to believe that this was the same house where I had once been tormented and driven out by Amber and her vicious sisters. But time had a way of changing things, and in the years since Amber's sentencing, I had worked hard to reclaim my life and my rightful place as David's widow. With the help of a talented legal team and a sympathetic judge, I had successfully overturned Amber's inheritance and taken control of the estate. Now, as I surveyed the glittering crowd of guests at the annual fundraiser for the David Henderson Memorial Foundation, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. The foundation, which I had started with a portion of David's fortune, was dedicated to helping victims of domestic abuse and emotional manipulation, people like me who had suffered at the hands of someone they loved and trusted. As I mingled with the guests, accepting their congratulations and well wishes, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. It was Jaden Cross, the pop star whose girlfriend had been assaulted by Amber all those years ago. He made his way over to me, a warm smile on his face. "Rachel, it's so good to see you," he said, clasping my hand in his. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done, both for me and for so many others. Your foundation has made such a difference in people's lives." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, overwhelmed by his kindness. "Thank you, Jaden. That means more to me than you could possibly know." As the evening wore on, I found myself slipping away from the party and out onto the balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The cool night air felt good on my skin, and I took a deep breath, savoring the peace and tranquility. But my reverie was interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, and my heart stopped. It was Amber, looking older and harder than I remembered. She had been released from prison a few months earlier, and I had known it was only a matter of time before she tried to confront me. "Hello, Rachel," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I see you've made yourself quite comfortable in my house." I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. "It's not your house anymore, Amber. You lost that right when you chose to attack an innocent woman and violate the terms of your father's will." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? The saintly stepmother who can do no wrong. But I know the truth. You're nothing but a manipulative bitch who wormed her way into my family and stole everything from me." I shook my head, feeling a surge of pity for the broken, angry woman in front of me. "I didn't steal anything from you, Amber. You threw it all away with your own selfishness and cruelty. And now you have to live with the consequences of your actions." Amber's face twisted with rage, and for a moment I thought she might lunge at me. But instead, she just stood there, trembling with impotent fury. "I may have lost everything, but at least I still have my pride," she spat. "Which is more than I can say for you, you pathetic gold digger." With that, she turned and stalked away, disappearing into the night. I watched her go, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. I knew that Amber would never truly be able to let go of her anger and resentment towards me. But I also knew that I had to move on, to focus on the good that I could do with the resources and platform I now had. As I turned back to the party, ready to rejoin my guests and continue the important work of the foundation, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The chapter of my life with Amber and her toxic influence was finally coming to an end, and a new one was beginning. One filled with hope, healing, and the power to make a real difference in the world.